I'd like to begin by thanking the organizers of this conference and to offer my apologies for being unable to join you in Tucson today. I'm very glad to submit this pre-recorded lecture and to participate with you remotely from Spain. Last year, I had the privilege of taking my Carleton architecture students to Barcelona for 2 weeks, a very welcome break from the Canadian winter for us all. We happened to be working with a site in the El Poblano district of Barcelona, where we stumbled upon a new urban planning strategy test site, the Superilla, or Superblock in English, where traffic had been rerouted around a 9-square block of the city to create a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly public space. Oddly abandoned, the Superilla appears to have been taken over by guerrilla urban experiments, such as seeding, plantings, saturated graphics, and what appeared to be human-scale game boards painted directly onto the asphalt. To me, it seemed most like an empty film set, designed with some specific scene in mind, but without its actors. In this desolation, I noticed handmade banners hung on a few surrounding balconies reading, "No Superillas." I was intrigued. In fact, at the time, many thousands of protesters had logged their distress with change.org. Grievances stated by opponents include that the design was absurd, that it was created without any consultation with local residents or businesses, and that it would only exacerbate Barcelona's traffic problem. Despite the local controversy, the Superilla project has been getting a great deal of attention from urbanists, especially in North America. The idea that a city could so boldly push the automobile down to the bottom of the urban food chain lifted eyebrows throughout the continent where cities are made for cars. The planning principles behind this neighborhood redevelopment project in Barcelona were part of a more global phenomenon in how we think about the built environment. Emerging technologies are making tools that offer new possibilities in how we see cities. We see more than we used to, and that is changing how we think. There is an ongoing shift in the way we experience cities, from a city experienced through physical buildings and physical infrastructures to a city experienced through an overlay of planetary-scale digital networks, data streams, and logistical systems. These networks increasingly shape the built environment through interconnected systems of finance, computation, global-scale flows of standardized building materials, and risk management protocols. This shift is a prompt for new and interdisciplinary methods of envisioning the built environment and for new patterns of urbanization. In the year 2000, million-dollar blocks was shown at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. As described at the time by MoMA, of the more than 2 million incarcerated people in the United States, a disproportionate number come from very few neighborhoods in the country's biggest cities. In many places, the concentration is so dense that states are spending in excess of $1 million per year to lock up the offending residents of single city blocks. Using difficult-to-obtain data from the criminal justice system, the Spatial Information Design Lab, headed by Laura Kurgan at Columbia University, in partnership with the New York-based Justice Mapping Center, has created maps of these million-dollar blocks, and of the migratory flow between city and prison in 5 of the nation's cities. The maps pose difficult ethical and political questions for policymakers and designers, Laura Kurgan has explained. When they are linked together with other urban, social, and economic indicators of incarceration, they also suggest new strategies for approaching urban design and criminal justice reform together. Spatializing this data caused us to see the city in a new way. Global-scale phenomena were legible at extremely local scales. The incarceration system of the United States became personalized, and the data became a design constraint. Barcelona, like many other cities, is publishing the data it collects about its infrastructure and citizens online, and web developers, urban designers, and architects are using that data to find new ways to envision the flows of people, capital, goods, and information that define the city of Barcelona. These experiments yield stunning visualizations, but also aid in discovering new ways to see the cities we live in, how they were made, and the forces that impacted the urban environment through time. They also offer new ways of producing relationships between building scale information and urban scale information, as well as aiding us in discovering what cities could become. Barcelona has a historical legacy of urban experimentation. In fact, the city's unique urbanism is the direct result of past technological shifts. In the context of the Industrial Revolution reshaping cities in the mid-19th century, Ildefons Cerda first coined the term urbanization through his careful and highly technical observations of how Barcelona's working classes lived and their daily habits. This resulted in Barcelona's iconic octagonal, chamfered, donut-shaped blocks. By 1850, Barcelona was a city constricted by its medieval fortification. An industrial port city strategically located on the Mediterranean, Barcelona had experienced a population and economic boom driven largely by the textile industry benefiting from new forms of engineered automation. The working class, the bourgeoisie, and the textile factories all existed in the same small ancient city. Public health was in disarray. Each epidemic that swept through the city would kill off 3% of Barcelona's population on average. Demolition of the city's fortification would mean a large-scale redistribution of the city's population that would need to be managed and planned. A new district, the Eixample, or expansion in English, would be created outside of the city walls. Ildefons Cerda, a little-known engineer at the time, undertook a careful and meticulous study of how the working classes lived. He looked at the causes of poor hygiene and how spaces were used on a daily basis. He calculated the volume of air a person needed in order to breathe correctly. He listed the trades and professions Barcelonians worked in. He listed public facilities and institutions they would need access to, such as hospitals, schools, markets, etc. He mapped existing conditions and quantifiable public health information together and concluded that the narrower the streets were, the higher the mortality rate. Cerda approached his plan as a process rather than a big idea, and along the way invented the term urbanization to describe this process. The general theory of urbanization was published in 1867 and codified Cerda's work and consequently the discipline of urbanism. This quantifiable scientific study of how people really lived in Barcelona led him to generate a number of tailored responses to the needs of the city's residents and as a cure to its public health ails. Gardens in the center of each block ensure adequate access to light and air. Wider boulevards and chamfered block edges facilitate the smooth flow of traffic, and evenly distributed services and institutions create access for both the rich and the poor. His approach was revolutionary. The use of current technology to quantify patterns of use in order to adapt the city to the way its residents lived rather than the other way around was new. None of this was well received at the time. In fact, Cerda did not even win the design competition to remake the Catalan capital. Antoni Rovira, Barcelona's chief architect, had won, but the Spanish government stepped in and effectively installed Cerda as the architect of the new Barcelona, an intervention that was born out of historical tensions between Catalonia and Spain and a harbinger of future tensions to come between Barcelona and Madrid. Today, Cerda's blocks remain highly visible in the urban fabric of Barcelona and are an icon of the city. Over the years, capital forces have led to the development of higher levels of density, filling in a number of the interior gardens in each block, but many principles of the plan remain in effect. Ironically, the subversion of Cerda's original plan has replicated some of the ails it sought to resolve. Traffic congestion, crowded sidewalks, and air pollution are the chief problems that the Superilla project seeks to address. Like many cities, Barcelona is seeking to generate new levels of density in balance with healthy and productive lifestyles and has employed creative zoning and tax incentives to catalyze these types of new development. Among them is the Superilla project, which I had happened upon as a pilot project in the El Poblano area of Barcelona. Following the spirit of Cerda, the Superilla project intends to reduce automobile traffic and improve the air quality of the city. Beginning with the 9-square block, automobile traffic is rerouted to the exterior roads, leaving the streets within a new zone for pedestrian urban activity. The proposal in its fullest manifestation would require a shift in lifestyle, an adaptation of the public to the built environment, which seems out of sync with the capacity for data spatialization to align global phenomena with more local patterns that has been made evident by projects such as the $1 Million Blocks, as well as other more recent work. This master plan for the Superilla project bears similarities to Cerda's 19th century approach. The few pilot projects that have been installed have been met with resistance, mostly directed toward the totalizing design of the 9-square blocks. A throwback to the 9-square grid concept, this hierarchical and highly modernist approach is out of sync with how much more we can see and how that makes us see ourselves in new ways, as active participants in global phenomena at a highly local level. What is interesting is that the feedback is being heard. With each pilot Superilla, the plan is adjusted and reconsidered at a local level. While it remains to be seen what the ultimate capacity for big data to disrupt urban planning and development processes might really be, it is clear that collectively being able to see more about how cities and other interconnected systems function has begun to redistribute political power. More nimble networks are supplanting top-down hierarchies, and the Superilla is one small manifestation of this. This growing necessity to rationalize global phenomena with very local conditions in the built environment could be described as new localism, a term coined by Bruce Katz of the Brookings Institute and Jeremy Nowak of Drexel University. According to Katz and Nowak, the new localism is a philosophy of problem solving for the 21st century. Cities are now dealing with some of the hardest challenges facing our society: social mobility, competitiveness, climate change, and more. The 20th century was very much about hierarchical systems, specialized, compartmentalized, and highly bureaucratic structures. The 21st century is going to be about networked, distributed, and led in less hierarchical and much more local structures. Cities function as networks of networks, and some, especially the largest cities, contain networks that reach well beyond their geographical boundaries. The kinds of open source data made available by many cities, including Barcelona, offer new possibilities in engaging with new localism in highly productive ways. In a time of national-scale dysfunction, cities have something to gain. In the wake of the Trump administration's immigration policies, New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, along with 20 other American municipalities, declared themselves sanctuary cities, effectively subverting a federal mandate. The authority of networks is demonstrated here, and it is precisely because of the complexity in these sets of interconnected systems and players that constitute a city that a city is able to outmaneuver the top-down federal system. The forces forging new localism have also produced an urban-rural divide that is played out at a global scale. Because the networked nature of dense urban environments has begun to supersede national hierarchy, those living in rural areas have become disconnected, fearful, and in some cases even desolated. Even in Catalonia, these events have played out recently. While new localism is beginning to reshape the urban fabric of Barcelona through the Superilla project, the urban-rural divide in Catalonia produced the Catalan independence movement. The promise of a participatory urban design process using technology to catalyze the ability of everyday people to see new possibilities in their urban environment is hardly a new idea. But the Superilla project has shown us that while far from smooth, the process has in fact been participatory and relatively transparent. In an abstract manner, the same forces that created President Trump and Brexit are also producing new possibility for less hierarchical models in considering the built environment. Contemporary practice is beginning to address these new levels of complexity and to engage in the productive power of new technology to relate global-scale phenomena to the crenellations of very local conditions. The concepts and applied principles of the Superilla project in Barcelona generated controversy, due in part to a lack of adequate technological apparatus to clearly understand the less physical dimensions of life in El Poblano. Additionally, the local controversy surrounding the Superillas is linked to larger networks of forces reshaping urban environments that have resulted in the recent more global-scale phenomena such as the Catalan independence movement, Brexit, and the Trump presidency. Thank you.